Foundation. Please. Find the right foundation. The security issues on that, how
That has never been the focus of the U.S. assistance.
right, I was with the
ما أسأل ما لنا عسكر هذا يودي إذا ساكي هلا هذا يعني يودي إذا أختار موضوع هذا باوركن ماشي عادي عواصف تقوية لأنه أنا أنت هذه كل كشكل حاسك هذا لا كمان هذا يعني يودي على صدره يوجد يعني مقطع ما هو يعني ما هو كمان كون waxaa sumac mid malaha ina ku dhaay ya carruurta la isku raadsaday Somali ka shaqeeyo ya Somali ka ku diiwa ده هسه كل جوا يوسف ده داي أسي ولا أنا أنا درس كان درس علي
environmental, state seaweed, Because one of the guys they're also getting projects where they say for carbon sequestration is more of that mangroves, seagrass. Those are not only good for conservation, there's natural Yeah. Greatest Marlon Sick. That I don't know what you thought. So I'll give you an example. In the U.S. Hawaii, 100 years ago, there was 1 million people that lived in Hawaii, and they imported 2% of all their goods. They naturally produce 98% of everything that they needed on an house. Today, it's completely reversed. Same population, same amount of people that you have to support, but trade, industrialization, all of it. Wow. That's so interesting. I had no idea. Yeah. Yeah. Really? Wow. Yeah. And then the fact that was one of the biggest, like I said, that's why we don't continue as
Yeah, that feels so. I wish somebody's good looking through. Yeah, what am I? Ah, what am I?
Welcome. This is a very private event. We try to make it slow and secure, and we're streaming live on YouTube. And so welcome. We're slightly exhausted. I am the member of parliament. We're in the house yesterday running around like chickens. But we got a lot of things done with meetings, with discussions. We're hoping to have policies and laws in different countries that allow trade, that protects the rest of Somali businesses. We cannot do anything without laws. So we start there. So this is the press of many trips. We know we have he's here an envoy from the Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Parliament, Somalia. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister is stuck in Kenya. He can't make it, but we intend to have a different event for him and Mr. Fisher, so we can actually have discussions. But again, right now in front of us, we have members of Parliament and Congress, which is important. And so, I hope we can, start that discussion to ensure we have a closer relationship between the US and Somalia. It's really important. It's something I've said to chairmans in the House, and I'll keep pushing for that. Before we start the event and the discussion, I would like to have a moment of silence for the victims in Lassinos. We all know what's happening in Lassinos. And just a moment of silence, please. Thank you very much, No. And so I will step off, go hide somewhere, and enjoy the discussion.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين يتلون كتاب الله وأقاموا الصلاة وأنفقوا مما رزقناهم سرا وعلانية يرجون تجارة لن تبور ليوفيهم أجورهم ويزيدهم من فضله إنه غفور شكور والذين الكتاب حق مصدقا لما بين يديه إن الله بعباده لخبير بصير صدق الله العظيم.
Thank you very much. That was an opening prayer. It's our Somali culture that the prayer made before any event, and to respect Somali culture like we do in this country, you know. So please begin now.
Okay, so the original plan was you had a few people who were speaking first, but that's not happening. Okay, so maybe the best thing to do is begin by just introducing ourselves. So Congressman Hart will go.
I'm Todd T. Hart from Kansas. I grew up in not far from Minnesota. I know some of you are from, but ended up in Kansas working for the Boeing company. And I worked for them for 14 years and got involved in politics thanks to my wife. And was elected to Congress in 1995. I served until 2011, where I met my business partner, Dan, who will speak shortly. I was in Congress for 16 years. I served on the Appropriations Committee, on the Defense Subcommittee, and also on various other subcommittees, including Foreign Operations. And have seen good relationships and other parts of the world. After leaving Congress, I ran a technology company for a couple of years as an interim CEO. I've done work with nonprofits. And about a year ago, Dan Burton and I and a couple other members of Congress started a firm called Congressional Colleagues. And we've been working on religious liberty issues and also human rights, as well as some other, we're working with a company on fuel technology that I think would be very helpful for this country and in Africa. Very interesting. I'm here today because Carl has been very outstanding in getting people organized, and it was a great pleasure for him to invite me to be here, and I hope to be contributing to this conversation. I think one of the strongest connections that we have in America to Somalia is the Somalians who live here in America. They have firsthand knowledge of the difficulties and challenges that the country is facing, and we want to see that country succeed. Not only because we have citizens here, but because it's the best thing for human rights. It's the best thing for people to have opportunity. And so how do we create that environment? And that's what I hope to contribute to while I'm here today.
Thank you. I'm Mursal Khalif. I am originally from Somalia, but I'm a dual national. I've lived in the US from the Midwest to the Northeast, Minnesota to Boston. I've worked in the healthcare industry before moving back to Somalia. I was in healthcare management, and last 7 years I've been working in Somalia, served different capacities as a Minister of Health and Minister of Planning and International Cooperation for one of the 5 federal member states. For the past year and a few months, I've been a member of the federal parliament. I serve on the Defense Committee of the Parliament, and I'm here as a guest in that capacity. The one thing I'd like to accomplish through this, and as Carl Van Botten and his firm have been supporting during my trip here, is to establish parliamentary congressional working relationship. The 2 legislatures on both sides. We are both countries of laws, and everything we do is based on the laws of our respective countries. So coordinating and working together, and as I will talk about more, I think it's about time to take the U.S.-Somali relationship to a new level, going beyond security, but trade and business opportunities on both sides, which our entrepreneurial people on both sides will hugely benefit from. I hope to accomplish reaching out to American and Somali American businesses in that regard during my trip, as well as strengthen and start a working relationship between our two legislative bodies.
I'm Congressman Dan Burton, and I'm from Indiana, the heartland of America. And I served in the Congress for 30 years. I was on the Foreign Affairs Committee for the entire time. I was chairman of the Africa subcommittee for 10 years, so I worked on a lot of issues involving the whole continent of Africa. And I've been very concerned about a number of problems. Some of them are human rights, some of them are trade issues. So I'm very happy to be here. Carl invited me. I'm very happy to be here to talk about some of the issues that I know are important to the people of Somalia. It amazed me that Somalia, as important as it is, where it is, and all the oil that they have in their immediate area, why their trade representation with the United States is small, at less than $1 million a year. I mean, Somalia ought to have a tremendous economic connection with the United States, and hopefully we can talk about that today. Anyhow, it's nice being with you, and wherever Carl is, I appreciate him having us here today. He's hiding from
Okay, Eric Schultz, I guess I've been tagged as the moderator. So I'll just, I'll tell you who I am. So, first of all, I'm originally from Minnesota, grew up in the Twin Cities, the heartland of America.
There you go.
I have Kansas connections because I went to Denver University for graduate school. So I drove through Kansas many, many times. My dad's family is actually from Indiana, in fact, from Hobart. So I have Indiana connections too. So anyway, so I was 32 years in the Foreign Service. I finished up as ambassador to Zambia. I was there from 2014 to 2017. Before that, I was the deputy chief of mission, the deputy ambassador in Ukraine from 2010 to 2013. Before that, I was the head of the economic section in Moscow for 2 years, from 2007 to 2009. So I have a little bit of an interest in what's going on in the world right now. Let's see, I retired in 2018 after I left Zambia, and gotten to know Carl, become friends with him, done a few business things with him. He asked me to help with this event today. I'm very happy to be here. Yeah. So anyway, I have just a few comments that I'm going to make, kind of to frame the discussion to begin with, and then I'll start with a few questions that I've got, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. I hope you've got lots of questions that you want to ask. So I don't claim actually to be an expert in Somalia. My area of Africa was Southern Africa, but there are some issues that I think that cross over. So Somalia, like Zambia, like many African countries, has a very difficult history with respect to colonialism. So if you look at, in particular in Somalia's case, you have the Italians and the British, kind of competing for influence and kind of forcing the country together in the first place, but then also dividing it to a certain extent. And so independence, I guess, was around the same time, the early 60s, and since Somalia's independence, the country has had, I would say, kind of difficult history. It's like almost anything that could go wrong did go wrong, whether it was, starvation or genocide or refugee flows or civil war, corruption, and like the problem with all of this is that the country didn't develop either socially or economically because of all of the ills that afflicted it. And really, it almost became a byword, I think, for chaos in Africa. Somalia did. We've all seen Black Hawk Down, the Battle of Mogadishu, and that's what most Americans actually sort of think of when they think of Somalia, is that, we sent this group of soldiers in to try to stabilize the country. and it was a failure of the mission, and the country became even frankly more chaotic. And it became sort of a source of terrorism, of religious extremism, and high risk. So it's, as I said, anything that can go wrong sort of did go wrong. And it's only really in the last, I don't know, maybe 5-10 years that things have begun to calm down, to stabilize a bit. There are still lots of issues. Al-Shabaab is still out there. It's still causing problems. You have sort of three separate entities in Somalia. You've got Somaliland, you have Somalia itself, and then I guess Puntland is also sort of functionally independent. So so you've got those issues still to work through. So I tend to think, and I think this is really the topic of what we're here to talk about today, is that the best way for Somalia to cement its democracy, to cement that stability, to begin to drive positive change in the country is through development of the economy. Somalia has potential, no question. It has economic potential. Congressman Burton mentioned, oil. So we know that there's a lot of oil in Somalia at this point. The world still needs oil, so that's a potential source of revenue that can then be used to drive economic growth. I think that the United States needs to play, in my opinion, a bigger role in Africa writ large, and in particular in countries like Somalia, in helping those countries develop economically. We've been a little, I would say, passive the last, I don't know what you want to say, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, but we've been a little bit passive when it comes to Africa. We kind of let the Chinese move in and start driving economic development on the continent, and that hasn't been really, in my opinion, a good thing. The Chinese, have other agenda items as well. They want to sort of push a kind of an authoritarian approach to civil governance, and their version of economic development is very different than the Western version. State capitalism, whatever the heck that means, and basically I think that the Chinese approach is really, I do think it's kind of a debt trap. So they offer you money to African countries to build things that they don't necessarily need, and then that gets put onto the country's credit card bill, but it eventually has to get paid back. And so, that Zambia actually just concluded a very long, difficult negotiation with the Chinese last week over the money that they owed, which is somewhere in the order of $8 billion out of $20 billion that they own altogether, which is more than 100% of the country's GDP. The Chinese didn't forgive any of that debt. They gave them, a period during which they have a concessionary coupon rate, 1%. That's something, but they absolutely categorically refuse to even consider, forgiving debt, and that's actually, sooner or later, I think that they're going to have to come to terms with that, because the Chinese are. They're a little bit like the pusher. The African countries are the drug user, and the IMF, and the World Bank, they're the cops who just have been kind of like not paying any attention to all of this. And you have African countries that are so deeply in debt right now that there's really no prospect that they're ever going to be able to pay that debt back. So what will the Chinese do? Well, what they've done in some countries is that they've taken assets. In Sri Lanka, they seized the port there. Anyway, I don't want to turn this into an entire Chinese, is bad, event, because I think, to be fair, we're also partly to blame for that, because the United States has not been active in encouraging American businesses to invest in Africa and to help develop the countries economically. And we need to do more of that. Again, in my opinion. And I think that actually the last couple of administrations have started to come to terms with that. DFC is a positive development. The fact that we're looking for ways to reinvigorate AGOA, that's a good thing also. But there's a lot of work to do, is what I would say. And now I've got to check and see whether I've covered all the points I wanted to make here. Actually, I have, in fact, astonishingly enough. So I guess what I'll conclude by saying is that, I think Somalia is at a stage where it has to rebuild its country, rebuild its economy, rebuild its country. I mean, it's, 30 years of war and chaos has left its mark. And I think that the way, as I understand it, the Somalis want to rebuild the country is the right way. Through inclusive politics, through democracy, through capitalism, through private enterprise. And I think those are all things the United States should be able to get behind and help, and we should be, frankly, doing more, I think. And so I guess those are my remarks, and I'll kind of maybe start with you.
I don't know if these folks ever heard of Mark Twain. Mark Twain was a great writer, and he was supposed to give a speech. And the fellow who preceded him went into all the details. And when Mark Twain says, well, he just said everything I was going to say. It's nice to be with you.
But I was supposed to ask you a question.
So he's covered an awful lot. No. But it's very well done. But what I'd like to say is that Somalia is in a very strategically important area. And it's a shame where they're located. That alone, there ought to be a lot of business and trade with the United States. And then on top of that, you have all the oil reserves off coast there. And it was handled properly by the government and free enterprises there. I would think Somalia could become an economic power in Africa. It just takes some work and motivation and some governmental leadership. Somalia did $26 million in trade with the United States, I think last year. 25 million was us selling to you, Somalia, and less than 1 million selling to the United States. That's just unfortunate because you had so much potential. Somalia has so much potential and so much in the way of reserves that they could use to build a big economic structure, and it has not been utilized. You just mentioned a few minutes ago about the trials and tribulations that have taken place, the military problems that have occurred, civil problems. Those things need to be overcome. But if they are overcome, and I think the private sector, business people as well as governmental people, can have a tremendous impact on making Somalia into an economic powerhouse. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight. But if they get it on the right track, it's my opinion that, and I've worked on Africa for 10 years, it's my opinion that Somalia could go from one of the least important trading partners of the United States and the rest of the world to one of the most important. So I'd just like to say to you here today who are interested in Somalia and Somalia trade, especially with the U.S., we want to work with you, with the private sector and the government, to try to get everything on the right track so Somalia can be, like I said, a very strong economic power in the whole of Africa.
Thank you. Honorable, yes. Would you like to make some?
Yes, thank you. I truly believe that Somalia and the United States have a long way to strengthen the trade relations. As Congressman Burton said, we have done very little in the last reportable data, 26 million on both sides, 25 of which is from US-made products and services being bought in Somalia, and only 1 million the other way. I think there is a potential to increase on both sides by tenfold. But before I go more into that, I really want to change the narrative and identify there is the long historic relationship between the two countries, but it has been fraught with interruptions from the Cold War to the Somali Civil War to the rebuilding of Somalia. The fact that Somalia is battling insurgent terrorist group has been the focus of the relationship and most of the cooperation and collaboration, only followed by averting humanitarian crises such as famines and droughts. But we have opportunity to go beyond that. Over 70% of the Somali population is under 30 years old. And that's the biggest human capital that we have. There is an inherent entrepreneurial spirit with the Somali people. We have shown that in places like Minnesota or Columbus, Ohio, or even in East Africa, where many of the businesses, import-export businesses, other trade that's done locally in those places have been dominated by growth from the Somali community. So by opening up trade, one example is not just the natural resources, but also Somalia has the longest coastline in all of Africa. Very important. Very important. Somalia has two rivers with estimates of the agricultural products from the area, the regions of those two rivers being able to feed up to 100 million people. Yet Somalia has somewhere between 15 and 20 million population inside Somalia. So there is potential for a lot of those agro products to be sold outside of Somalia and provide food security for the entire Horn of Africa region. The fact that the fact that Somalia stays in a perpetual cycle of war, famine, drought is the result partly because of lack of outside investment. Because investment will provide jobs for the youth, will provide a sense of stability for an entire region, will enhance security and the governance overall of that part of the world. The U.S. national interests, which have been mostly focused on security, if we can elevate them to also focus on trade and business partnerships, will really be a worthwhile investment in the long run. The return on investment of doing more businesses in Somalia will reduce the humanitarian funding that's going to be needed in the long run, will also reduce the security intervention costs that will be needed on the part of the U.S. in the long run. So we have to really change our thinking about all of this. That I'm not going to quote Charlie Wilson's about building schools here and investing in order to prevent youth from joining terrorism or extremist groups. But what will mostly really, there's a saying a friend of mine has really uttered, and it stays with me years later. He said Al-Shabaab or Al-Qaeda offers youth, young men mostly, 70 virgins in the afterlife. If we can offer a job that guarantees one virgin in this life, if we can offer a job that guarantees one virgin in this life, it will be a worthy investment for all of society. So that's the mindset I think we should be thinking. In conclusion, I really want to say that Somalia is not and should not ask for handouts, but rather bilateral investment opportunities which will benefit both countries. Somalia is open for business, and those who get in early will reap the benefits in the long run.
Well said. It occurs to me that China has a surfeit of young women, actually. Maybe they should be exporting that to Africa instead of.
Never thought of it.
Just a thought. Congressman, you have the unenviable task of going last.
Well, first I want to say Ambassador Schultz did a nice job of sort of setting the groundwork where Somalia is today and all the perils that it faces. And when I look at needs now, I think in short-term and long-term scenarios. Short-term, as a former businessman, you want stability, you want access to utilities, um, roads, port, so you can get your goods in and out. So there are some short-term needs that I think are important. And long-term, the infrastructure, you have to have the ability to feed your population, of course. And I know that there's a famine going on now, but what we're seeing in other countries, even somewhere places like California in America, they've had a drought in California, and then they had this big rain surge just this year, but they couldn't retain any of the fresh water that came from the rain. So it all went through because of their environmental rules and some other bad decisions that California has made. Most of that water just escaped to the ocean. And I know that many countries have not had the conservation concept in mind because they're battling with the short-term problems and not seeing the long-term solutions. And so I know there's some things that could be potentially done to preserve the benefits that you have as far as rain and use it for agricultural purposes. And so I know there's some long-term solutions for some of the short-term problems. But you got to get past the short-term problems. I think where China has made inroads is they've tried to address some of those short-term problems by saying, "Oh, we'll build you highways, or we'll build you this other infrastructure." And yeah, it's a loan. And what we're seeing in a lot of countries, Ambassador Schultz mentioned the defaults that have happened already in Africa, but it's also in the Middle East too. They've had several countries that are defaulted. And China doesn't forgive the debt. It reminds me of a college student who gets his first credit card. You know, they don't, or a checking account. They think as long as they have checks, they've got money in the account. Well, they don't. You know, the money runs out soon, and then you have to pay that back. And I think what Somalia should be looking for is some stability in their short term, working on some infrastructure needs, which I think they can find aid to help with that. Feed the people. The fisheries are very important. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. It's Eric, right? Jason. Jason from the Ocean Foundation is here. He's concerned about the sustainability of fishing. Other countries can come in and take all the fish, fish the fish, but Somalia needs to have this ability to plan sustainable, renewable sources. So I think there's things that the relationship between America and Somalia can help in the stability. We often think of stability first in terms of military, but it's also infrastructure and there's other ways that with the ocean, you know, the Ocean Foundation is another way that can be helping to make sure that you have stability in your food supply. Because with all those people under age 30, as the Prime Minister said, there's a wonderful resource there. And Carl von Batten was talking about why aren't they making phones in Somalia? Well, they could. But there's certain things that have to be in place. As a businessman, you want the stability of the infrastructure. So how do we get from point A to point B? And I think that roadmap is something that needs to be laid out by Somalians so that they understand it. I think we can help. I think we can find ways to develop some short-term solutions, but think long-term, agricultural-wise, trade-wise, sustainability-wise. And I don't want to get caught up in a lot of politics about this, but yet politics are involved. In Washington, people think, you know, I used to run a company, and as CEO, if I needed something done, it got done or somebody got fired. But in Washington, D.C., there's 535 independent contractors plus a president. And the president's got, you know, massive, he's got 2 million people that work for him. Congress has another 10,000 people that work for them. And to get something through that pipeline is not an easy task. And it's something that requires vigilance and persistence. But that vision of what Somalia is going to be can be achieved by taking it one step at a time, starting with the fundamentals, create some stability, some infrastructure, feed the people through fisheries and agriculture. Think about retaining, developing a strong agriculture base. I think that Somalia's got some wonderful lands. It seems like it's suffering a drought now, but if there has been desert reclaimed in other parts of the world by planting trees and by retaining water, and I think those examples could be used as basis for part of that agriculture restructure. But I guess I'm wandering off a little bit here of what I want to say. I want to say that deal with the short term as soon as you can, make long-term plans, but lay out a plan that people can understand easily here in America as well as in Somalia, and then move towards that goal. And I think that is achievable.
Thank you very much. So the basic format here is I'm just going to ask a couple of questions and get things rolling, and then I want questions from the audience. Honorable Khalid. So my question to you would be, I don't know that much actually about Somalia's internal politics, but it does strike me that the fact that you've got three different, kind of entities sharing the space, that's a complication. So is that something is that an obstacle that needs to be overcome in order for the country to develop economically and to develop politically? And are you optimistic that that's possible?
Well, thank you for that. I want to correct the premise of the question to begin with, because there are no three separate entities. Somalia has adopted over 10 years ago what's called a federal system, which meant that the formation of federal member states into a federal republic. So we have 5 federal member states, including Puntland, Jubaland, Southwest, Hirshabelle, and Galmudug. Those 5 federal member states have autonomous capacity for certain authorities under their government as prescribed by both the state constitution as well as the federal republic's constitution. So there's devolution of powers, just like in the United States. So as the state of Indiana, the Honorable Dan Burton Scott has its own state constitution, its own state assembly. Those federal member states have their own constitution, their own assembly, and they manage a lot of their affairs. The federal republic has powers as well, including monetary policy, defense, and immigration, to be the top 3 powers compared to the federal republic. Puntland is not a separate government outside of Somalia. It's one of the 5 federal member states. So I want to make that correct.
Okay.
With regards to Somaliland is a breakaway part of Somalia, claiming independence, but hasn't been recognized by either the Somali people or the Somali government or anywhere else outside of the world. And the problem is that there have been successive negotiations to identify a way to bring them back without violence. And I think past presidents, past leaders, and the current leadership have all been correct to pursue a peaceful means to negotiate, reuniting them within proper Somalia. And I think that's a task. However, there have been recent clashes within the territory of the northern Somalia, where Somaliland claims to be an independent country, especially in the region of Las Anod and Sol, where they have been forcing parts of the Somali people to remain, who wanted to get out of that secessionist movement, to remain in their forcefully. And there have been serious human rights violations and what I would call war crimes happening there over the last several months. And the world and the United States need to be cognizant of that. In terms of the overall governance part of your question, I think it was Winston Churchill who said that democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. So having accepted a democratic system with a federalist process, a federal system of democracy, there are these challenges between the different powers within the even federal government, the legislative versus the executive versus the judiciary, and also the federal system versus the federal member states. And I think that's a healthy way of continuing good governance for the most part. And we are going to learn from older democracies like the United States in how to resolve that. Although sometimes it seems that even those much older democracies are still struggling with the sharing of those different powers between the legal, constitutionally rendered entities within the government. So we are a working process. Overall, I want to say that Somalia is a very resilient country in a state of recovery, not in a fragile, failed state of recovery. And that recovery is evidenced by our governance, because in the last 10 years ago, there was no federal system of governance. There was still the central government in which Honorable Halane was the finance minister and the two presidents. But now we have all these federal member states formed. They all have their government structures in place. There are challenges within them, and sometimes between them and the federal government, and that's something we will overcome. Overall, we are on the right path for governance. There are corrections that need to be made, like fighting corruption, ensuring collaboration between the federal member states and the federal government, as well as enhancing the security cooperation within the region, not just with inside Somalia, but with bordering countries, because there have been 6 or 9 months ago, the President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud declared war to liberate the areas under the control of Al-Shabaab. That war has been going on very successfully, but there have been a number of challenges along the way, one of which is the full involvement of all the federal member states. And that's one of the things that needs to be completed in order to enhance the security cooperation between the federal member states and the federal government.
Well, thank you very much. So, in essence, what you're saying is that the country is not fully stable yet. There is still work going on in that regard, but you need to start on the economic development side of this now. It's not something that should wait.
What I'm saying is, country is mostly stable.
Mostly stable.
We have work to do on the security sector, but we can walk and chew at the same time.
Yeah.
We can work on the security issues while we are investing in the business and trade sectors.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Congressman Burton, and you're welcome to jump in as well. So the question I have for you is, I was reading this article the other night about Somalia, and there's a quote from Stephen Schwartz, who was my counterpart in Somalia. And this was probably circa 2018, because what he's referring to is the fact that this is when the Washington Nationals won the World Series, right? That their budget for salaries for their players exceeded the budget of the Somali government in 2018, which is pretty shocking if you think about it, $200 million. So what my takeaway was similar to his, which is that it really wouldn't cost all that much for the United States to step in and maybe be a bit more generous with countries like Somalia in helping underwrite economic development, but also social development. When we want to, we can come up with the money. USAID in Ukraine right now has a budget of $28 billion this year. So what do we need to do to change that? How do we get the U.S. government to care more about Africa, and how do we get American businesses to care more about Africa?
Well, speaking about Somalia in particular, in order to get more government more government participation with Somalia, our government, I think there's a couple of things, and also the private sector. You want to have private sector investment. I think there's a couple of things that need to be done. One is to create a more positive image of Somalia. Unfortunately, all we see when you go to the movies is pirates taking a ship from Somalia. And you see Black Hawks Down, where a bunch of American soldiers were killed. And that permeates the United States mind to a great degree, more than we'd like to admit. And that needs to be changed. And so I think there's a PR problem. I mean, obviously, you have so many assets over there, the oil, just all kinds of resources, that Somalia ought to be an economic powerhouse, and not powerhouse, but a strong economic situation. And in order to get the investment, you have to convince our government leaders, and you have to convince the private sector through, through connections with the various businesses in the United States, that it's safe and economically feasible and going to be profitable to do business in any country. And in particular, we're talking about Somalia. So I think Somalia has a couple of problems they need to deal with right now. One is a positive image. There needs to be some effort to put this stuff behind them, what's taking place, and let the business people and the government people around the United States know that this is not going to happen. It may happen occasionally, but it's not going to be a major issue with them from an investment standpoint. And I think the second thing is Somalia needs some PR people in the United States selling Somalia. Now, Carl is a good man, and I'm sure he will be very helpful. But you need a strong presence that will get the message out that Somalia is open and ready to do business. It's a safe place for economic investment, and it's a great place for the private sector to go in because you have so many assets that the private sector would like to deal with. So PR and some reaching out to get the image out the way it should be. Because the image right now, even though these things have happened in the past, still sticks in the mind of our government leaders as well as the private sector.
If I can add to that, I think Congressman Burton is onto something that I think is very important. That image is important. So how do you create that type of image in America? Part of it, I think, is that you have a goal. We have to have one kind of a central theme that everybody can remember or repeat. And Somalia is open for business. It's probably not the right one, but some catchphrase, marketing catchphrase. So I think that's right. If you look from a business perspective, it comes down to what's going to be my return on my investment, or ROI, they commonly referred to in the business world. So when to attract people to come in and do business, there are things that the federal government can do to assist that, but you really need somebody who's willing to look at the ROI and say, yes, Somalia is worth my funds being invested there because I'm going to make money. And I'll be able to do good things with the money that I make. And certainly everybody that's employed in Somalia will be better off looking for that one virgin that's been promised somewhere. So I think that return on investment is kind of the baseline. So if you get this vision, you get people's attention, and then create an environment where that's easy to achieve a return on that investment. Some tax advantages. If you look at like Ireland, Ireland was having difficulty employing their people, and they came up with a tax structure that was very successful internationally because it was easy for people to make airplanes there, highly technical products. So there needs to be a good tax structure. There needs to be some things, some foundational things, security, which is mostly secure now. The attack on the hotel in Mogadishu was very unfortunate because Mogadishu is kind of the focal point, the largest city and everything. But there needs to be some sort of a way to make sure that return on investment is a good investment. So that infrastructure, or I want to get back to from an American perspective, how we would look at that. So you have the vision, the catchphrase, you start marketing a good tax policy, then you encourage the federal government to underwrite that tax policy and open, the trade barrier, on promising some trade through that. I think you can open those doors. but you need to have something that you can market that people can easily remember and project. You need to have some tax advantages to attract the business world. And then they'll take care of the distribution. These companies know how to distribute products. If you've got a good port, you've got a good, safe place to build products, they can train the people. A good education system is good for the country, it's good for the long-term prospect, but short-term, they can train people on to do the job they need to be done. You need to encourage them to invest the money. From the American side, like Congressman Burton said, once you get that positive image, you're working towards that positive image and get people to start looking to it as in, if Somalia says, well, if you come here, your taxes are going to be lower than anywhere they are in the world. We're going to guarantee your protection. We have a good port. We can do the trade. We can provide people the resources you need. Then it gets more attractive. So you want America to make sure that they are going to acknowledge that they're going to underwrite some of that risk that a businessman would take and elevate the status of Somalia within Washington, D.C., here within the legislative community. And that's, Carl von Batten is one of the ways that you're doing that now. I think that's a wise investment. You need to think about how you can, make that connection. Invite members of Congress to come to Somalia, maybe hold some kind of an event for them, give them an award, Friends of Somalia award, get their attention. There's 100 things that Somalia could do to open that door for that exchange of policy, that exchange of security, that exchange of finances. Make sure that you get that return on the investment, appealing return on investment, so that people are willing to come in and invest their money and employ your people and grow your economy and grow your trade. And it's that fundamental image problem that you got to start with. And I think that's where Congressman was correct. You get that idea that people are willing to, in Somalia and in America, that goal. Here's what Somalia is going to look like in 1 year, in 10 years. We want to get there. We're going to pull together. And I'm thinking of Somaliland. That we used to have a state here in the United States that was an independent country. We called it Texas. And Texas was, precarious by itself, rowdy, independent, but they saw that it was an attractive partnership to become part of the United States. And it was because the United States had a lot of things going on that they didn't have going on. And so they joined the United States. And I think Somaliland, the people of Somaliland, just like the people of Texas, are going to want to make that decision when they see that vision that you guys are going to present and those goals that you're going to achieve in 5-10 years. And I think that vision is what's going to be a turning point for Somaliland and for people of Somalia and for our relationship, America to Somalia. I think that vision is very important.
Actually, I wrote Power of Attraction down when Honorable Khalif was talking, because that's really what it's about. How do you unify a country and pull it together without using force? You have to attract it. So, questions from the audience? Yes, please.
I don't know what you're.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Asido Shai. It's an honor for me to be here. I am from Minnesota, Twin Cities. We call Little Bishop. When I hear about this gathering, me and my friend who's sitting next to me look for tickets to come because we knew we're gonna find the right people here. I grew up in America, but I went back to Somalia I think it was 2020, just to see, where my family is from, and understand how, because we hear about the Black Down, we hear about Dr. Phillips, hear about all of these different things about, Somalia, and coming to America and understanding how the American system works, understanding about politics, understanding about education and all of that, and seeing America, you see so many different people. You see Black, you see Chinese, you see, and all of them would say we are from Texas, we're from this. Like we don't. It's all about America. And then here in Somalia, like we're all the same. We speak the same language. We pray the same way. We eat same things. Yet we're fighting. That could not cross my mind. And I'm like, I need to go there. And then I went there. The first time I went with my two white friends, both men. Here is a little short woman, black Somali, with two white men in the middle of the bush. And after a long, traveling back and forth, I've learned a lot of things. And one of the things that I've learned about not just the resilience of the Somali people, but I've learned Somalis are tired of war. Somalis are tired. They're sick of tired about violence and all of that, and they wanted to pass that. Okay. Um, so Minnesota is when I'm in Minnesota, I feel like I'm also in Somalia because like everything about the food, the culture, everything, like you would go to restaurants, you would eat rice, you would Angela, you would see all of that. And so three things about what we're talking about here in terms of the of what the where we going with this. For me, the way I see it is in terms of the PR, we have social media changed so many things about Somalis. We have young kids who reach over 3 million followers. They have never left Somalia, but yet they know your names. They can call you by your name. They watch also American media. They have iPhone 14. I don't know how they get it. They way ahead of me, who was raised in America. They speak English. They know all of these different things. And so when I see that, I see opportunity. And knowing that Somalia, more than 70% are youth over the age of under the age of 30. And all of them, not only the youth, you would see parents who are like 50, 40, who have iPhones, who are watching Dr. Phil about families. And I mean, when I see all of that, I'm saying like, because we don't have our own TVs. And I see that, and I'm like, you know what, Somalia, I'm like, well, I feel like they will ask you, do you know how pizza tastes? Do you know about McDonald's? They know all of that. And so when you see that and you see the stories and the narrative in America we have is beyond imagination. It's totally different. And so when I see that, I'm like, the opportunity is there. Also in Minnesota, in Virginia, we have young Somalis who are also traveling back. And so seeing all that, uh, I can see a path for us to unite the Somalis worldwide. Just few weeks ago, Somalia passed the national diaspora policy, and that is also a foundation, a platform for us to take that back because the foundation is already there about politics, about education, about empowerment, about trade. All of that is in that, is included in that policy. And that's something we should share with you. Also, uh, in the Twin Cities, I know there are a number of universities who are collaborating, universities in Somalia, to have online classes for both ways. MCTC, it's a Minneapolis Community Technical College, has a sister relationship in Puntland State University. It's one area. Also, Osasco and Minneapolis have a sister relationship. It's a two cities. And now we have people going back and forth to create that foundation. So if we wanted to learn from people who already done that, it's something that we can. So for me to finish with the ideas I have, I think what we're doing today is really beautiful, and it's something that we can learn from us who have these stories and who have the ideas of where to go from here. I think I want to thank you for having this and it started here in DC, and we wanted to say that we are ready for this, and we have a foundation that we can fly from. So I want to say thank you so much.
Thank you. In the back row.
Thank you. How you doing? I'm very happy to be here. My question is, so first, my name is Million. I'm from Ethiopia, born and raised, moved here about 15 years ago. And my question to you guys is, in terms of Somalia, aside from fishery, and in terms of foreign direct investment, what industries do you think we should target? Just one or two industries, in terms of infrastructure, manufacturing, or, export, import. What industries do you think we should target when we're thinking about prosperity for the region as a whole, not just Somalia, but neighboring countries that can benefit from prosperities that can happen in Somalia? That's the question.
Thank you.
Well,
I'm not sure who that was for, but
I'm not sure.
whoever wants to jump in.
Just as we were talking, I thought of a couple of things that would be helpful to Somalia if they could emulate some of the things that we see down here in America. We have what's called trade missions, and we have governors from various states, Kansas, Indiana, all over the country, and they see opportunity in the area of trade where they can sell their products to another state or another country, and they'll set up a trade mission, and they'll say, now, for instance, let's just say Somalia has oil, and we need oil for our state. So what we need to do is send a trade mission over there and meet with their business people and their government leaders and say, we would like to set up something so we could acquire your oil, and at the same time, we want to be able to sell our products to you. So you look at the foreign country you're going to, and what do they need? What do they want? And what can we get out of it? And it's a two-way street. And you send that trade mission over there, and you sell. You sell what you want to sell, or you buy what you want to buy. And that's one of the things I think that the Somali government, Somali business people need to do. You can't just sit back and expect business, industry, and government to come to you. You have to sell it. You have to be a salesman. Everything's a sale. If you want to date a girl, you got to sell yourself. If you want to get married, you got to sell yourself. If you want to start a business, you have to sell yourself. And if you want to sell a country, you have to sell that country. Somalia has had a bad image for a number of reasons. Now, you have to overcome that. In my opinion, the best way to do that, countries in America, Indiana, are a big agricultural state, and set up trade missions, have the leaders of the country, leaders of business say, we need to go here and we need to tell them we want to do business with them, we want to buy their products, we want to sell our products. And so you actually not only create a positive image, but you create a sales force that's going to start stimulating economic development. But the government has to do that in the private sector. You have so many attributes in Somalia. The coastline is huge. You've got all kinds of oil, and then you have other natural resources. You have got stuff to sell, but you got to sell it. And so that's where business and industry and the government needs to set up these trade missions and connections so they can sell and buy products that will expand their trade. You sold last year less than $1 million to the United States, and you bought 25 million. Now there should be some kind of balance. The only way that's going to occur is for the Somali government, Somali business to sell it. And that's these trade missions and other things I would suggest.
Thanks. I want to thank Saida, sister from Minnesota, and I really agree with you. The greatest asset Somalia has is the human capital of its growingly educated youth, and that's something we should be investing in. The image issue, I think I learned this in grad school that when you have a good product with a poor image, the first thing you need to do is invest more on the PR and make sure that you turn around the image problem that you have. And that's precisely why one of the reasons I'm here, to work with legislators like Congressman Burton, to work with other Somali American business community people, to work with American business community, and first and foremost say that we are open for business and we want to learn from the best way of turning around that image from our American partners. The question from the brother from Ethiopia, aside from oil, Somalia has a lot of other natural resources, from agriculture to fisheries to mining, minerals, rare earth metals, well, that's part of the mining. So one of the ways we can actually do more business in Somalia is Somalia can serve as the gateway to over 200 to 300 million Africans, including Ethiopia, that are landlocked, given that we have that access to the high seas, from the Red Sea to the Indian Ocean. And that will generate a lot of economy, not only for Somalia, but for the rest of the region. And whether it's Americans or anyone else who wants to invest in, we would prefer to have to strengthen our partnership with Americans and have American companies and businesses invest in that. So without even exploring oil or minerals, just improving the access to the ports for many of the other landlocked countries, all the way to Central Africa, is one way of really improving the business sector. And the other resources, like minerals, the agro business, which is really one of the least tapped potentials for Somalia. The two rivers alone are estimated to generate enough food to feed over 100 million people every year. So we can we can provide food security for the entire region or most of the region if the agro sector is developed to its full potential. And that's one of the things that we hope we can do in the years to come. I will leave it at that, and
I think those are wonderful ideas, and I would vote for you. I was Somalia.
Spoken like a congressman.
One thing I might add is and I'm just going to go back and reiterate what I've said earlier. If Somalia had the most attractive tax policy in Africa, you would be surprised who would come and knock at your door asking you to do business. And I think in America, if we would acknowledge that and say, for American businessmen, whether they're an oil company or an agricultural company or a manufacturer, if they do make money, that they can bring it back without us taxing the devil out of it either. So that would encourage that investment from America into Somalia. Let us bring that money back without a big penalty on it, because we want it to be, worthwhile. There's when you talk to counties in a sub form of our government, we have the federal government, we have states, and we have counties. And in Kansas, there's 104 counties. And one of those counties is Leavenworth County, and there they have a military base. And on that military base, they say that whenever a dollar is spent, it circulates in that community, and 8 people also see that it circulates 8 times. That dollar is spent 8 different times. Well, if you get money invested in Somalia, and somebody makes $1 over there and gets paid $1, that dollar will circulate eight times in that community. So if you can get a manufacturer because of your positive tax structure, the most lowest taxes in Africa, then that money will then spread to your community. There'll be new restaurants, there'll be new clothing stores, there'll be a new infrastructure to support the people of Somalia. So this side, on the American side, we could protect that tax policy if Somalia would adopt it by saying that we're not going to punish people who invest in Somalia. when they need to bring their profits back. We're going to let that protection be in place. And on the Somali side, you'll have people that will say, well, you have a better tax structure than all of Europe, or you have a better tax structure than the Middle East. And it'll be more appealing to invest in Somalia when you have that. And there are more just taxes. I'm just touching taxes, but there's also regulatory structure that needs to be supportive, and there's other things that go along with it, the infrastructure. But a gateway to the landlocked countries is a wonderful element that can be capitalized, and that can also be very profitable for an investment. People then can sell that, not just export off the coast to the port, but export into other parts of Africa. And I was surprised that they grow bananas in Somalia. I read that, and that surprised me.
Thank you for inviting us. My name is Bashir Muhammad. I'm U.S. Army retired. Thanks for reminding me Black Hawk Down. I was there.
Sorry?
Thank you, Black Hawk Down. I was there.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm U.S. Army retired. So, and I'm working in the security sector in Somalia. I've been there since 2014. I just left there. And security it really is getting better than what it used to be. When we went there 2014, 2012. And I've been in Iraq and Afghanistan and others. But the security, like he said, we can do security while we continue security, we can do the investment. Let's say in Buntland area, there are minerals they digging now by hand. And if we have companies that go there, those minerals, those resources, and invite them some companies that will help those people and invest that as one big plus. It's Buntland, Somaliland, those areas, they have big areas, minerals. Also, ocean, we have the biggest coastline. It's not only fishing. We can also do seaweeds, we can do sea salt. She do sea salt company, she has that. And that will create jobs. So there are a lot of investment that we can at least continue. Like you say also, we need to do VR and image rebuilding in Somalia. Because we have a lot of bad ideas. Somalia, everybody when they hear Somalia, they will hear that Black Hawk Down, soldiers get killed and all that. So my question is there like you say, guy at the back, is there one or two that we can, like congressman, that we can attack, say, okay, the security sector, we're working on it, and also we have to move to this 2 or 3 sectors that will do the short-term investment.
One thing I would say, just in short response to that, infrastructure is important. Security, of course, is important, but if you have access to electrical power and a good road system to get your stuff to where you're going to ship them to, I think that's almost as important as security too. It's part of the package that needs to be available for attracting new businesses.
So if I could answer the question with 2 examples. I was asked earlier about AGOA in Zambia. What's its biggest success story? And to be honest, it's not a big success story. It's a little success story. It was a friend of mine who actually owns an emerald mine, and his wife, his sister, makes the jewelry, and she brings it to the United States and sells it, and makes lots and lots of money. So, and they're the single most successful Zambian company at using AGOA and all the the tariff protections and whatnot that are built into it. When I was in Zimbabwe, it was actually a company that, believe it or not, made pool tables called Presidential Billiards, and they made these pool tables out of teak furniture, and it was hugely successful in the United States. They sold tons of it. Made lots of money. So I think the answer to the question isn't that there's like one big answer. There's lots of little answers. Like if you can basically empower Somalian people to create businesses and make a product and be able to sell it in the United States, that's kind of the answer for how you grow the economy, how you grow it the right way. I think.
If I may add, first of all, Honorable Bashir, thank you for your service to both Somalia and the United States. We really appreciate that. And I've met you in Mogadishu. I have known the kind of contributions you and many of your American colleagues have made into improving the security sector. To answer your question, I think creating opportunities is the answer. Whatever sector it may be, the easily created opportunities are mostly in the tech and finance sectors in Somalia right now, which we talk about very little. The stock exchange in Somalia, for instance, has only 4 American companies. The banking industry has little or no partnership with American or Western-based banking systems. So we can open the doors for the tech sector, the finance sector, the banking sector. That will really simplify other investors coming in as well and putting down their investments in Somalia in the different industries. Yeah, it's on.
Thank you very much to all of you to outline, to give some positive, ideas on what to do. I will a little bit comment on the challenges we're facing. There is no doubt of the potentiality of Somalia, whether it is fishery, oil, or agriculture. Livestock is actually even as the largest livestock in Africa. And we export millions of sheep to the Middle East. Even though the return, I wish would have been positive, it's more of a negative to our culture and religion than anything else. One of the challenges is the country has no banking system to underwrite letter of credit is to import essential goods. How the Somalis are surviving is amazing. The money that comes from the diaspora, which is estimated at about I think now it's about 2 billion, goes to Dubai. And then the traders have offices in Dubai, so that cash in Dubai, some to Nairobi, Kenya, is used to underwrite letter of credit, and mostly they go to Asia and very few European countries. So you go to Bank of Japan, Bank of India, Bank of China. And one of the challenges is Asia is so close to Somalia with limited restrictions or standards or anything. and the Somali economy is mostly based on trade, which is also regrettably dominated by far war profiteers who control most of the trade outlets, connections to Asian market. What we are underlooking is that the country is decentralized. And the 3,000 kilometers on the Indian Ocean and the 330 kilometers on the Red Sea coast, it's all safe. The Somali ports are safe. You can bring goodies, you can take goodies from Kismayo to Berbera. All the Somali ports, all the coastal areas is safe. The fighting Al-Shabaab is more of the interior now. So I think it comes how to the message, how we can get a positive message or image to the US. I think the US can target the fishing industry, the ocean, the blue economy, and the petroleum, including the mining into that. So if the US companies are, I don't know how we can make it, interested in investing in those sectors, there is no tax in Somalia. Because, you know what we tax is nothing. Basically, it's a zero tax. We have what we call a ballot, $1 for a box of goodies. So tax will not be prohibitive or anything. It's actually more of an incentive. The issue is the image issue, how we can convince the American companies to come in. The market is also, and how they can compete with the Asians who are, right now, if you go to Somalia, all you find is the Chinese forks and knives which will break over the right. But that's what's in the market, so cheap. So how we can also bring quality control systems, we're still weak, but I think the government is trying to do that. And how the US can help the banking system, which will allow the letter of credit, saving and loan. Right now there's nothing. The American Express has agreement with local banks, so now you can have ATM in Mogadishu. I'm not sure if it is anywhere else.
No, it's not. Even if Mogadishu is not widespread.
I got a card and I tried here and it's working here. Also book was also Angarawood. So, but I think to focus, Asia is a challenge. Lack of banking is a major challenge. Trade is dominated by war profiteers, which need to be undercut and have decent, honest traders to be assisted. And the American investment is to focus on the blue economy and the petroleum. That's what I would like to comment.
I think we have time for one more, Carl said one more question. Oh, we have two, so we'll do two more. Do okay. One more.
Sorry. Just as he was asking that question, something come up. I remember few years ago when no country would trust Somalia, would go to Somalia. I remember Turkey, the president of Turkey, first president landed in Mogadishu to build that trust and that image. I think one thing that we can learn from them, one thing that we can learn, and ever since from you, from the airport to the freeways and to the hospitals, most of it was built by Turkey. And now most of the Asian and the European country has that trust because of that. Now, I think it's like only 1 month ago, Dubai allowed their airplane next to Qatar and Turkey to fly to Somalia. And that trust was built by the first president that would land in Somalia, take an airplane, land in Somalia, go to the city, was something that we can learn. I think one country, one company, or one country, whatever, can be the first to land in Somalia and say the first American company, the first American Congress, the first American to walk freely in Somalia. That can build a one image. Sorry, it's just an idea that came to me. And I'm like, I gotta say this.
At the back, maybe?
Thank you for the opportunity. So when you were discussing earlier, you said something that really touched me, which was creating opportunities. And that's something that personally affected me in my life. Before I got into the venture capital sector that I'm in now, I was in digital transformation sector, specifically focusing in Africa. We outsourced software development with using African firms to outsource development for companies here in the U.S. So I think that's this is not really a question; it's more of a statement to back up what you were saying, which was the sectors that I think we should be focusing on is fintech, the banking sector, like the gentleman said here. We can't underwrite our own letters of credit, which is not okay, right? The banking sector should have a lot of foreign direct investment coming into it, I believe, and blockchain development and having those sectors, play a part in our digital transformation in Africa, I think will leapfrog us into, the next generation of innovation. And yeah, that's basically what I would say. Thank you.
Right, thank you. I think we're done.
This gentleman had one last thing to say.
Congress, I just want to let you know, I used to have a business in Indiana, a city they call Lincoln.
Great sport. We saw a lot more than everything.
I see that, yes. My name is Awais Mohammed. Mohammed Awais Mohammed is easy for the Western people to call. And I have a system set up here in the community, and we work with Dr. Kraft as much as we can. My point is, as we talk Somalia on the all time, I used to export watermelon from Mogadishu to Italy. Not with sea way, but airline. And let me tell you, Somalia is very rich. The Somali people are the most business potential it can create. Dubai, Kenya, Tanzania, Zambia, United States. We have the skill, but we have one problem. We need the stability. The country, as the Congress said, you guys say that, country needs stability. And we are trying to, implement this because taking business there is the easy part. And as you say, I've been in the car business. I was a general manager in a big dealership, and they call ABC. A is always, BB a closer. Sell, sell, sell. We must sell ourselves, not to the American people only, but to all world. And that is what we need to start. But having His Excellency here, well-educated people, when we have in front of us, I think we can accomplish that trade mission. We can sell to any state from the United States, 50 states across the board. And we don't expect any handout. We are intelligent, we are smart. As Muhammad Ali say, we are handsome people.
I would just like to say that I was all over Africa when I was chairman. And I've seen countries that didn't have any of the assets that you have in Somalia, and they have had pretty good trade. They're landlocked, they're inside, they don't have the coastline that you have, and they were successful, at least somewhat. And so, just to follow up on what you said, people have to know what there is in Somalia that Somalia can sell. They have the ability to transport products, agricultural products, oil, all kinds of things, minerals, but you got to let the people of the world know it. Instead of going to South Africa or some other place, you have the same things, but you have a better avenue for distribution. So I would just say that the first thing that Somalia has to do is they have to come up with a trade policy. They may have to get some people here in America to help open the doors. But you need some trade policy, you need some people that can come over and make the case. You need trade missions. You do that sort of thing with a combination of government and private sector, you'll see it take off. It may take a while, but it will take off. You sell cars. If I want to buy a car, you don't call me up and say, you want to buy a Wrangler, do you? No, I go to see you. I say, I want this car. I'm going to advertise, but I want that car. I come to buy from you. You got to show the product, and then they'll come. Show the product, they will come.
How about we just take that minute? I've been a Ford dealership. I was the general manager of the Ford dealership. And Ford come out with the Windstar. Yeah, really good. And then people were buying this Honda Odyssey. 10,000 over MSRP. 15,000 over MSRP. And we have to convince them. But there was something I did research. So there was a newspaper report created this research collecting, 50 women in a suburb in Detroit, Michigan. So our closing tool was to tell everybody this is the best Winstar minivan set in the world. But let me tell you how. There's a woman, we say, 50 women like you, sitting in Michigan, come with the idea and tell folks, this is what we need, this is what we need, this is what we need. And people are buying the Winstar. People are buying the Winstar against the Honda Odyssey in the scene.
You know, you all give yourself a pat on the back for saying this stuff.
I live in Somalia. I live in America. And yesterday we spent hours, on the Hill of His Excellency, and we are a conservative firm. We're Republicans. Everyone at this table in this chair is Republican. Now, we work across the aisle with Democrats, but we are Republicans, and we want to bring that Republican values, Republican mindset and business to Somalia. We want to help you. I'm successful because of God. I'm successful with my friends. And I think, we have people right here in the room today who are willing to do opportunity to help Somalia grow. My business partner Mark is there still around here, and we would like to host you again. Because again, we've spent, I can tell you, days marching through the Hill, knocking on doors. He spent 30 years in Congress as the godfather of the Hill. And he's been a mentor to me, a brother to me. And so I will say, when you see me, yes, you see my face, but there are people behind me. I'm just a face. There are people behind me. And Chairman McCall has been outstanding. He's a friend of Somalia. Republicans in the Hill have been friends of Somalia. They have seen things quite different. Yesterday, we had discussions from a direct communication between the Somali Parliament and Congress. That never happened in history before. His Excellency, he's been sent here as an envoy from the Somali Parliament, from the Speaker of the House, who, inshallah, will be here in a few months. And so we are opening bridges with, we're changing things. We don't have AGOA. I believe it's going to be announced in December. It's approved. AGOA open trade in Somalia. And like the Congressman said, we need to have trade missions, and Republicans are willing to help you do that. Republicans are willing to help you do that. We have a rep here from US Reach. We have Reach to sell. I like selling America, but look at my Somalia. And so, we are talking on the Hill about having different bills, both sides to ensure we can buy US products and sell and buy Somali products and sell to Somalia. It's a partnership, an equal partnership here. But I want to tell that Republicans are ready to work with Somalia. I have to give a big shout out to Chairman McCall. He has helped us block a lot of what I call anti-Somali bills and established a lot of pro-Somali bills. There are things you find in the NDA, in the appropriation bills that mention Somalia in a big way. Republican leadership are giving Somalia a chance. They see Somalia. Forget what you're in the media. That's not true. The biggest, one of the biggest policies in Africa that saved lives was petrol by my old boss, President Bush. Which saved lives, millions of lives. And so Republicans, if it's Democrats, yes, they're there. But Republicans want to work with Somalia. We want to do business with Somalia. And members here will help create trade agreements. They'll help create trade groups here in the UDC. I'll tell you a story. Sheikh Hassan has been a great influence. He was here in DC in August, and I spoke for a long time about AGOA. And through his leadership, we've got AGOA to the goalposts. When we have Somali government, American government, Somali business, American business working together, we can do everything. Nothing can stop us. And so, before we wrap up, and I want each person to make a statement, close out, so we can close out. What I just want to say is, we believe in Somalia. We want to work with Somalia, and this Congress, this Republican Congress, is ready to do business. I will say big shout out to Mark, great guy. I thank everyone for being here. We're gonna have more events like this. But again, the key is to have good street partnership and the street missions here that you can do, and we are very fortunate anyway. Ambassador Force has been outstanding. I mean, we've been together to the tables talking about Somalia, and he's helped me a lot. And so again, when you see me, just me, there are people behind me, Republicans behind me. And so, make this happen for you. Thank you.
Listen, we used to get it when I was. I'm 64. Right, so I'm from